Hi, this is Larry Correia, and you're watching Costly Conversations.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to Costly Conversations. I'm super excited because we have the one and only Larry Correia, author of the Monster Hunter series and the brand new book, In Defense of the Second Amendment. Fantastic read, and we want to talk to him a little bit about that today. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Larry. And I guess tell us a little bit about the book. Like, what's going on? Like, what inspired you to write this book, which is unfortunately timely, as it seems like always in the Second Amendment community. It's timely. So what inspired you to write this book?
Well, I'm a novelist by trade. That's what I do. I've written 25 novels, and they're pretty popular. I do pretty well. But before I was a writer, I was actually in the gun business. I was a firearms instructor. I was a CCW instructor. I was an SOT 7, so I did machine guns, suppressors, that kind of thing. I've been involved in gun rights my whole adult life, and I've kind of always been a big believer in the Second Amendment. And then years later, after I had a really successful writing career, I'm a best-selling author. One of my editors who had edited my fiction books had gone over to a nonfiction house called Regnery, and they wanted to do a big Second Amendment rights book. They wanted to do a Defending the Second Amendment book to try to move the needle on the conversation, to try to help people understand the gun rights battle, and to help people on the fence learn the facts and truth and help people on our side, articulate better arguments. And they said, okay, who do we know who can write a book for us, who knows this stuff like the back of his hand, but who's a good writer, who's a storyteller. And this one editor is like, hey, I got the guy. He is the gun nuttiest guy in fiction. And I've been doing this my whole career. And the other people there was like, well, I don't know. He's not a pundit. He's not on Fox News. He's not a media guy. Is he going to be the right guy? He's a science fiction author. What's he going to know about this? And the editor's like, no, trust me, this is the dude. And, I've been having a lot of fun with this. And honestly, this is a subject I'm super passionate about. And I would have wrote this for free. Don't spread that around too much. But no, I'm just a Second Amendment guy. I'm a gun guy. I come from the gun background, gun culture, and I've been fighting this fight for 3 decades now. And I've heard every argument you can hear. I've heard every excuse. I've heard every proposal. And I just wanted to go through and just take them apart one by one and just try to help people, get the facts and arm them with the truth. So
yeah, actually in the book, In Defense of the Second, if you guys haven't checked this out, it's according to the release schedule, it should be out today. That said, you actually have a chapter dedicated, I think it's either 4 or 5, to really just pulling apart literally every single gun argument that you hear from really unfortunately uneducated people. I really wish they were educated and really bringing, arguments that made sense, that maybe we could kind of go back and forth and come to some sort of understanding. But like silly stuff like, oh, why do you need a weapon of war? And I love how in the book and I don't want to spoil it, but I guess we're going to do that a little bit today.
Spoiler, I love guns.
hey, I do too. And in the book, you said, even some of the Remington rifles and shotguns and, things like that, which seem like, oh, those are kind of innocuous, classic American guns that are used for things other than, mass killing or quote unquote mass killing and things like that. That those are even in some instances more effective and more powerful for the purposes of destroying human flesh, and which is just an unfortunate side effect of some of these things, but also unfortunately necessary if you are talking about defending your home from invaders or your wife who's 5'2", 100 pounds soaking wet, whoever, or your daughters or whoever. Defending themselves from attackers, which, they're vulnerable, like we should give them something. And so I've been going on for a little bit, but I appreciate that you had the chapter dedicated to just going through these one by one by one. What's an assault rifle? What's a high pack capacity magazine? XYZ.
Yeah, there's so many. And like I said, I've been doing this for so long. I've heard it all. I've heard every possible thing. I mean, I do have one chapter where I get into the stuff that's newer, like last 5 years they've started doing, but I go through everything I can think of. Like the weapons of war thing is so silly because they're like, well, nobody needs a weapon of war. Well, actually, we do, and I get into why we want weapons of war, specifically the Second Amendment, being the big red button on the Constitution. It's vital, and then self-defense. You want a weapon that's effective and accurate and reliable, just like the military does. And the weapons of war thing falls apart. And like I said, the Remington hunting rifles and Winchesters and Remington 870 pump shotguns, those are all weapons of war. And in our lifetimes, even the revolver was a weapon of war. It was issued to air crews as late as the Gulf War. And so all of these things are weapons of war. So the whole weapons of war thing is just kind of this silly emotional misnomer. They're talking about like AR-15s, super popular, common in America. They freak out because they get used in crime, but you know what? They get used in crime because they're the most common gun in America. It's like getting mad that a Honda Accord is the most likely car to be used in crime as a getaway car. It's because there's millions and millions of Honda Accords. That's just how it is. Um, I don't know. We dealing with these people that I find that there's the people who are well-meaning but emotional, and they'll make these arguments because they heard them and they want to help, and they actually do care, but they've just kind of been lied to for a long time, so they don't know any better. And then you got the other group that knows better, and they don't care. They'll flat out lie to your face. They'll make stuff up. They'll push for policies that actually hurt the demographics and communities that they're trying to save, supposedly, and they just don't care because to them it's all about winning. It's all about getting more power and more authority, and they'll lie to that first group of emotional people and just manipulate them, and it's really gross, and it's messed up. And I've been watching this for so long that I know all their arguments better than they do. So I try to go through pretty much all of them. I probably missed some because there's hundreds of them, but I hit everything. I hit high capacity magazines. What's an assault weapon, which is a
Yeah.
made up term. Background checks, the gun show loophole. I just try to break down all of these things. But it's
Yeah.
like you said, man, we want this effective stuff because this is about defending our families. I want my wife and my kids to be able to defend themselves, and I want everybody to have the rights. The Second Amendment is for everybody. So I don't know. I'm just trying to fight the good fight, and I'm trying to help other people get into the fight. So I hope it
Absolutely.
works.
Absolutely. And, a big purpose of the show is trying to spread this awareness to other people, especially the marginalized minority communities who will tune in and enjoy the content. But also, I want everyone, especially those who are kind of new to this space, as you know, 2020 was kind of a boom year for introducing new demographics into the space. I really want them to understand, like, what does freedom actually mean? Because most people, they have the luxury of not really thinking about that. you know and like,
Yeah,
what does it take to
it's
defend freedom? you know
yeah, it's one of those things that's easy to take for granted until it gets put in your face that it's being taken from you. And it's interesting because 2020 was it was a bad year in a lot of ways, but what was really interesting to me is if you look at the numbers, gun ownership skyrocketed. And you can talk to any FFL in America, they'll tell you the same thing. They had lines out the door, people were paying scalpers prices, and those weren't gun nuts because we got ours. We're not going to like wait in line and panic because we've already got our guns. Those were new people. And a lot of it was you had a breakdown in society. We got this societal contract that people would just kind of abdicate their responsibilities and assume the government will take care of them. But we saw it in 2020. We had people who all of a sudden they realized they were on their own. And they had police departments saying, hey, if you have an emergency, don't call 911. You're on your own. Good luck. We can't come. And so all of a sudden, these people who their whole lives had just taken for granted that I don't want a gun, guns are dangerous, guns are scary. All of a sudden, it was like, wow, the cops aren't coming. I'm going to get killed. And so they rushed out and bought whatever they could. And it's interesting because if you look, I do have it. One of the chapters in the book is about the changing demographics of gun ownership. The way the left likes to portray it is often as, I should say, the media. The way they like to portray it is that like it's this old white guy thing, and it's evolved over time. At one point in time, it was primarily culturally an old white guy thing, but that's of the past. Most of those guys who were kind of stuck up and insular, they wanted to keep this as their club. they're dying off. And if you look at the modern generation of gun owners, it's honestly a diverse and welcoming bunch because people, we get it. Like this generation of gun owners, we've been through it. Uh, we've seen the people who are supposedly on our side sell us out. We've seen people say like, "Well, you can go ahead and take those icky, scary assault rifles, and as long as you let me have my duck hunting gun." And that those days are pretty much done because those people have aged out, and everybody else is like, "Nah, we guns are for everybody. Guns for the Second Amendment is for America, all Americans." And honestly, the best thing that we can do, all gun owners, is like you're talking about the conversations and getting people educated. I'm kind of an evangelical gun owner. I mean, I'm not. I'm not evangelical. I'm just saying that I like getting the word out. I like getting people involved and training them. Honestly, the best thing we can do for bringing people into the gun culture is take them shooting. Get them out to the range, let them see that the stuff they've been told on TV is nonsense. Get them out the range, have some fun, teach them safety. I don't know. That's kind of how I roll. So I'm hoping this book helps people who are sitting on the fence.
No, absolutely.
I was talking. I outed one of my friends earlier. He wants to be a gun owner. He loves the idea of having a gun for home defense, but his wife hates it, and she won't let him have a gun in the house. So I kind of wrote this book for both of them because she's not like super militant about it. It's just that she has heard all these lies over the years. If you have a gun in your house, you're 43 times more likely to shoot yourself than an intruder, which is just made up. This is straight up a lie. They just
Yeah,
made it up. And that one's been around since I was a little kid. I mean, that's from the
jeez.
80s.
So how could that statistic still be accurate today if it's the same? It's wild.
Yeah, totally. It's funny because actually, that was one of my favorite ones because the dude just straight up lied. He took this tiny little sample, and then his math was all junk. But what it was is I pointed out that lie started when original Top Gun was in theaters, and it
Mm.
was still being told while Top Gun was in theaters. That's how much time
That's
has passed.
that's hilarious.
And they're
Yeah,
still
because
rehashing it.
yeah,
That's how so lame.
yeah, no, that is one thing, and I'm glad that you were able to speak about this new generation of gun owners that's coming in and kind of changing the landscape in such a way because I truly believe that the anti-gun movement, and I try to stay away from the left and the right just because I know people who consider themselves left of center who are very much pro-gun, and I'd hate to lump them in with this
Yeah.
sad anti-gun argument. That
And
said,
it's also too. I know right wingers that throw us under the bus in a
oh
heartbeat.
yeah, well you don't need those dirty suppressors. That's for criminals. And what do you want full auto for? And we're not for abolishing the NFA. Like, bro, get out of town. If you're not for abolishing the NFA, we're not friends. Not like that, anyways. Like you can still talk to me, but I don't. That's
Yep.
kind of where it stops. That said, I am extremely excited about kind of continuing this conversation and bringing even more people in. And I'm glad that you are putting resources out here, like the book in defense of the Second Amendment, which is a really easy read. Like, let's just put that out. And that's something I did want to talk about is when I first picked up the book, and I've kind of been reading a lot more recently than I have in even recent years. Um, I expected it to be way more academic, for lack of
Yeah.
better terms. Just kind of statistics and sightings, and you do cite plenty of stats, and you have a whole reference page in the back for all the different articles and whatnot that you pulled. But it's an extraordinarily easy read. Almost so
Yeah.
much that I was like, oh, I don't know, it's a little simple. And then then it kind of beefs up a little bit towards the middle, where it's like
Yep.
maybe I just adjusted and I felt like it was more of a conversation. Like I'm sitting here talking
Yeah.
to my guy, and he's really just kind of letting me know, like, bro, did you hear about this? Yeah. Well, reality is these people, they get offended when more people don't die in an incident because it kind of goes against the narrative.
Yep.
And so I appreciate that. Now I know you're a fiction author by trade. Is that kind of where this conversational style came from?
It is. Yeah. I mean, because there's some really good books out there that are gun rights books, but they tend to be academic and statistical and cold and calculating. Um, I come at this. my background's guns. I mean, I was in the gun business, but I'm a storyteller. I'm a professional storyteller. My job is to talk to people and tell them an entertaining story. And so my writing style tends to be very just open and colloquial, just like I'm having a conversation with somebody. And so that's why I wrote the book. And so everything in there is factually accurate, and I cite the heck out of it. And I mean, we did a lot of research. It actually took as long to do the backing up the sites and the research as it did to write the book. And I actually had a team of people from the publishing house went through and checked everything I said for accuracy. We actually had a group of lawyers read over the book too to make sure everything I said and there was like obeying the law and telling the law correctly. But overall, my how I communicate is I'm just me, and I'm just going to tell you what I think and how I believe. And I mean, I've got a lot of real life experiences and stuff, and I try to tell those stories in an interesting way. And I try to use examples instead of like academic examples. You know what I mean? And so I'm just kind of going at it that I want to convince these people that the Second Amendment is vital and important and needs to be defended. I don't want to bore them, and I don't want to try to impress them like because I can because I know more. A lot of times we read these books and they come from a position of like I am the professor expert dude, and no, I'm just a guy. I say at the beginning of the book, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a pundit, I'm not a political pundit. I'm just a guy. I'm a novelist who loves guns and has been into guns his whole life, and that's how and I got a lot of experience with that. But I don't. I just want to talk to regular people. Is kind of what I'm going for here, and I think it worked out pretty good. And so I don't think there's anything really quite like this. You know,
Yeah.
I don't work for a gun lobbying organization. Um, I mean, I talk about them in the book because some of them do really good work, but I don't like pick any sides. I don't like say this is the best one. Go join it. You know, I'm not.
Right.
My team is America. You know, I'm just trying to help. So
Thankfully so.
yeah, I'm glad you like that though. That's what I was going for.
Yeah, no, I really came to appreciate it as things started to develop in the book. And I was like, you know what? I feel like I don't have to like take it to like another level to really sit down and marinate in the book. And it wasn't a barrier for entry. And I feel like a lot more people are going to be able to get into the book because, let's be honest, a lot of folks aren't reading like they should be. And so they'll be a little dusty. It'll be
Yeah.
a little hard to kind of get into something that's much more rigorous, per se. That said, I don't want to insult anyone's intelligence and say that they're not capable because I think anyone is. Yet, I think this is a really easy read. And I just want to leave that at that anyone could pick it up. Even a kid in school could pick it up and read it and be like, "Oh, is what I've been hearing on the news?" And I feel like maybe this is a good book for a certain age to kind of get into the
I
conversation, anyways.
I think honestly, if you have teenagers that are interested in this stuff, I think definitely this would be. Uh, I'd have no problem giving it to teenagers. I mean, I do talk about some very harsh stuff. I talk about use of force laws. I talk about actual crimes. I talk about mass killings. I talk about different criminals, and so it's pretty dark. But like honestly, like if you've got a mature teenager, yeah, there's no reason they shouldn't know this stuff too.
Yeah,
Um,
no,
I mean,
absolutely.
I started my kids out really young on guns, so for me, I just kind of assume I've always kind of treated my kids like grown-ups, and they turned out okay.
Yeah. Now, use of force, that is an interesting topic just because I'm currently in a course that it heavily discusses use of force. And we just spoke to an attorney who kind of like went through Texas use of force codes just to kind of like let us know, like, hey, if you end up in this kind of situation, guess what? You're in trouble. So don't do that. Do this. And really just understanding when the levels of force are justified. Even just your physical presence being a level of force, and then going on to the final level, which is deadly force. Um, that said, I think it's super important to talk about that, especially as a gun owner, because a lot of guys, unfortunately, and I don't want to make any gun owner look bad, but there are enough people that they get a gun and they think it makes them powerful, and that
Yeah.
is not the case. It's not a special shield. It just gives you a chance in the case that you have no other choice, and I can't say that enough. So thank you for going through that in the book and making sure that people are kind of aware of the different use of force and whatnot.
I would say that's probably honestly real. I mean, if I had to pick what would be the most important chapter in the book, I would say it's probably the chapter that goes over use of force laws, just because there's so many misunderstandings, uh, not just amongst the general public, but amongst gun owners too. And the more you know about that, the better off you'll be if you are going to have a firearm for self-defense. To know how reality works as opposed to the myth and the news and TV, which is usually wrong. So I don't. It's not like a big legal primer or anything, but it's kind of honestly when I used to teach CCW, uh, basically that was my lecture. That chapter was kind of the hour-long lecture I would give on the fundamentals of use of force law, and I hope that people would kind of like read that and understand. Also, the other thing that really helps, even if you're not going to carry a gun, but you're kind of on the fence, if you read that chapter and you learn how use of force laws work, you will spend a lot less time getting fooled by the news media because the news media loves to take different cases. They don't give you all the context. They don't tell you what's going on, but they set a narrative and they say, okay, this happened, get angry. But then if you know how the use of force laws work, you can look at that and analyze it for yourself and say, okay, no, this was actually justified. This actually made sense. This wasn't just some crazy thing. This was a thing that a reasonable person in legal terms would find reasonable and would believe. So I hope that chapter helps some people
Yeah,
because I've seen some
I believe
dumb
it
stuff
will.
out there.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because and here's the thing, and I got to put this out there. If we have, and I haven't read the latest statistics, but if we have 300 million Americans, give or take, depending on the year, in existence, and so many of them are gun owners, and so many of them are adults of a certain age who are able to get into a kerfuffle, lack of better terms, you should know that many of them will get into situations that they don't fully understand. And even like, I know this doesn't have to be said, but even like in a use of force situation, if somebody gets mad at you and gets in your face and starts yelling at you, if they haven't touched you, you can't touch them. You cannot do it. Like I know that's a given for many people, but some people generally believe that, oh, if you verbally assaulted me, I can knock your block off, and you can't. That said, I know this is not necessarily on the specific topic, but I hope that people are able to kind of read through that chapter and be like, okay, now I'm motivated to do a little bit more research. Now I'm motivated to maybe take a CCW class that is more comprehensive. Or even if they've read the book and they've decided, you know what, I'm not a gun owner. I don't plan on being a gun owner. I'm still not convinced. It's not for me. At least they'll have an understanding because you
Yeah,
can become educated and not choose a path. It's perfectly fine.
yeah. That's one of the things I address is because there are people that it's just not for them. It's not. I mean, psychologically, they're just not wired to carry a gun. They're just not wired to have a gun, and that's fine. That's a personal decision. Yeah, and so like if they're uncomfortable with the idea of having a firearm for self defense, like they don't think they could pull the trigger on another human being, that's great. That's their decision. All that I ask and all that I implore of them is don't put that on the rest of us. We're not you, you're not us. We're all different, and every single person I've ever worked with or taught, they all had different levels of skill, knowledge, commitment, courage, whatever it may be. And I'm not saying anyone is right or wrong. I'm just saying human beings are different. And a lot of people were like, "Well, I could never shoot somebody. That's fine." And other people are like, "Oh, if I had a gun, I would get angry and shoot people over parking spaces." Okay, you definitely shouldn't carry a gun, you know, and that's fine too. That's good you recognize it.
Yeah,
But honestly, most of us, we're fine. So don't put your problems and your hangups on somebody else. If somebody else wants to defend their house with a firearm or defend their family, conceal carry a gun in public, that's up to them. I mean, and so I think we have too many people in this debate are kind of busybodies. They think whatever their state is, that's the state of everybody else, and they're going to impose it on the rest of us. And that's
absolutely.
just not fair.
It's not. And I feel like now is a great time to go into a quick commercial break. So let's go ahead and do that, and then we'll continue on with the conversation. So, for those of you who are listening at this point, thank you so much for listening to our guy, Larry Correia, author of In Defense of the Second Amendment. You should check out his book. He's not paid me to say that, but I think it's a good book. That said, you should also check out Blackout Coffee. Why? Because they support the show, and anytime you purchase using our link, it helps tremendously. What we do here is rather expensive, and I would love if you would use the code Atlas10 to get 10% off your order. Check them out, see if you love them. If you don't love it, return it. But if you love it, enjoy coffee during the show, and we can enjoy coffee together. All right, now back to the show. Larry, so how did you find the balance between snark and genuine outreach? Because it's easy. It's easy to get real snarky. I know you know,
Oh yeah,
but how do you
that's
find
a
the
balance.
balance?
That's a hard one for me. I had to tone it down a lot because I've dealt with so many willfully ignorant people and angry people over the years that I got like no patience left. Like
I get it.
if you see me on the internet and some dude comes up and starts going off about, oh, you just want to kill children and murder people, you angry redneck. I'm tired of that. I've heard it all a million times, and I'm real short with those people. So when I'm writing this book, I mean, I definitely had to keep in mind, like, look, these aren't those people. I'm writing this for regular people. These are not the people that are on the internet yelling at us and calling us baby murderers. Okay, this is just normal people. This is normal people out there who are wanting to learn and trying to better themselves. And so I try to tone that down. That said, there are certain people in the book that I do talk about that I have no mercy, and I just can't. I have no mercy in my heart for people. I talk about some different anti-gun organizations that straight up have done horrible things and have lied and been caught lying and have twisted and manipulated. Those guys, no mercy, both barrels. I just give it to them. There's certain politicians who have said some truly horrific things about the Second Amendment. Once again, no mercy there. In fact, just so you know, like I said, there's a team of lawyers went through this book to make sure that everything was legal and factual. There were a couple things I said about certain politicians they made me pull out because they were a bit much, and
Well,
they were like, you have to say allegedly that they're that's and I'm like, okay, so yeah, I said some pretty mean things about a few people, but to be fair, I'm trying to like uh, demonstrate to people just how profoundly dishonest some of this is in the media. Because I think the media, there's a big chunk of the U.S. media is directly complicit in causing murder. I truly believe that because what we see with mass killers is these mass killers are, well, some of them are completely chaotic. I mean, they have no real motivation. They're just nuts. But some of them are very intelligent and they'll write a manifesto saying exactly what they're trying to accomplish. I had to read a bunch of these for this, and they're gross. But you get these people and they're like, I want to be famous. I want to be powerful. I want everyone to know my name. And so they know that they need to cause as many casualties as possible. So they'll specifically go to gun-free zones, which politicians have created, so innocent people are helpless, and they'll specifically tailor their crime to get the most media coverage possible. We've seen this. We've had them flat out say that that's what they're doing. We've had these murderers say, "I'm going to go to this place because people are unarmed. I'm going to use this kind of gun because it'll be on the news more, and the more people I can kill, the more famous I'll be." And sure enough, what does the news media do? It rewards them. And yeah, sure, that guy's probably dead. He probably got shot. But the next guy, the next psycho, he sees that and he sees the last psycho be the most famous man in the world, and he's on the news. The president of the United States will stop what he's doing and talk about him. He'll be on the cover of magazines. He'll be on the cover of Rolling Stone. And all of a sudden, so the next disaffected loner, crazy guy is like, oh, wow, cool. I know what I have to do. And that's why we see where there'd be like a rash of several of these in a row. And so those people, yeah, I'm pretty mean. I'll be honest. I don't really pull any punches with those people.
and that's understandable. At least to me, I don't know about anybody else, but to me, that's understandable in the sense that some people are even unintentionally, seemingly genuinely complicit, just based on the numbers, based on what we see, and based on the industry standards that others have established. In the sense that there are small independent news organizations, and even the course that I was mentioning, we talked about some of the mass casualty events, And one of the things that, like the one here in Texas with, ooh, what was the hero's name? It's escaping me. But they said,
Oh,
yeah,
the church.
yeah, the church and Jack Wilson, and he stood up and took the guy out. And we actually know like the guys in my class, they knew Jack, or they know Jack. He's still living, and so they're like, yeah, and we know that we knew the kid who did that, or if you want to call him a kid, I like the term monster a little better, but not everybody will use that term. That said, no hard feelings. So they were like, yeah, we're not going to use his name. We know who he is, but we don't. Like, it's just a class of like 10, 15 guys and gals, and we're still not going to. Okay, I respect it. Why? Because we want to continue in the tradition of not promoting, not glorifying the names of people who
Yeah,
literally did this for fame, literally
yeah.
did
Don't
this
reward them.
for public applause in the sickest sense. So why would we? And when we see small news organizations like different YouTubers who do news stuff and whatnot, and even some independent media guys who are really good about not saying the name of said killer, and then you hear, oh, MSNBC, CNN, and I don't know if legal will clear me saying these things. I mean, I've not talked to your team. I guess they can take it up with me.
Oh, it's
Anyways,
fine.
and when we see these large news organizations being just willfully ignorant, or I guess feeling like it's their journalistic duty to say the name of XYZ killer, troll monster guy who really feels like it's his duty to become powerful. I think it's just insane that we continue to allow these people fame. It makes no sense to me. So I can appreciate um, your feelings in that
I,
sense.
I managed I managed to go through this entire book talking about dozens and dozens of cases, and I never once named one of them. Like I mean, every time I talked about a case, I would talk about the time, the date, and the location. Um, and if I did talk about any names, it was usually the people who fought back, the heroes, the people who stood up, the people who made a difference. I don't want to give the monsters. I don't want to give them what they want, and I don't want the next potential bad guy to look at that and say that that's the way to go because he wants to be famous too. And I think honestly, Ebert, Roger Ebert was a famous critic, movie critic back when I was younger, and I disagree with this guy about everything, very politically. But he said once, and he was a member of major media, and he said the worst thing we could do is give these guys what they want, and I agree with that. And I mean, some people on the media side do see that, but most of them don't, or I think they are actively encouraging. They would like the body count. And I hate to say that; it's gross, but it's interesting. I do talk about. I have a chapter where I talk about the vultures, is how I refer to these people. That's because they're perched and they're waiting, and then when there's something horrible, they swoop in to take advantage of the tragedy. And we see this over and over again. And I go through like the pattern, and it's interesting. Every time another one of these happens in the news, you can see the same exact pattern. And I've been watching it for decades, and it's always the same. The only difference is they've gotten more blatant and uglier about it. Like they're not suave anymore. There's nothing smooth about it. They just come in and they bludgeon you over the head. It's the first thing they say is, okay, the bad guy somebody that we can use to malign people we disagree with? If not, is the gun something we can use to push for more gun control? It's a very cold and calculating way they do this, and it's all to prey upon the emotions of that first well-meaning group that I talked about, of people who they're not necessarily out to destroy America and steal your rights, but they're kind of like Stalin referred to the useful idiots. It's just you they spin a narrative and they swindle people, and so yeah, I that's one of those topics I had to talk about in the book because it has to be covered. But I tell you, it's kind of wearying to honestly go into all these cases and murders and study this stuff. And and see this pattern over and over again.
Absolutely. No, and I respect the fortitude and wherewithal that it takes to kind of go through and kind of beat yourself up in the emotional sense to tell the story and to be honest about it. Um, that said, I mean, even what you said about the media narrative, and even right now, there's currently a uh, a mass shooting that, or a mass murder or mass killing event, however you prefer to say it, that happened recently. And I don't want to speak too definitively about anything because it's still very fresh. And as you and I both know, the the facts will come in and then the facts will change and the facts will come in and then they will
Yeah.
change in a matter of minutes, it seems. So we can't speak definitively about it, but it seems in California, in a decent area, um, somebody went in and murdered about, the estimate is about 10 people, if I'm not mistaken. You can
I
tell me if
heard
I'm wrong.
11.
11?
That's
See,
the last I heard earlier today was 11. I don't know what that is, if that's
yeah,
accurate
I
or
mean,
not.
one is enough. One is enough to be a problem for me, anyways. Any reasonable human being. That said, we are seeing like, okay, the media narrative, the media cycle is not spinning as hard, and I'm like, wait a minute, this happened on over the weekend. It's Monday morning. I'm on YouTube, and I'm not really seeing all the people chirping about it. It's not so clearly the guy wasn't white. Like
Yeah. It's
that's
so it's so it's so predictable and dumb.
yeah.
And I mean, I read about the pattern, and I was doing a radio interview this morning about that. And they brought that up, and they said it was look, it's the pattern you put in your book. We watched it today in real time. The killer. At first thing they do is they rush to conclusions. We had U.S. congressmen like Adam Schiff
Mm.
tweeted about how there was this crime and the victims were Asian. So clearly, this is a case of, I'm paraphrasing, I can't remember exactly what he said, but this is probably bigotry. And this is hatred against the Asian and Pacific Islander community. And it's like, this is before there's any information out there. And then it comes out that it's a guy who was part of that community. It wasn't like a bigotry thing, it was a personal thing. I mean, we don't know the details. Obviously, I don't want to pontificate, but it's more just an example that it doesn't matter. They take whatever the thing is while the emotions are high, and they just strike. And they make up whatever they want, and they just lie their butts off, and they do that to us. And then when the facts come out over the next usually 3 or 4 days, and that doesn't work with their narrative, they just drop it. So, like I said, if it had been a white guy with a big red MAGA hat, waving a Confederate flag, it would have been everywhere Monday morning. It would have been on every news station, pounding in your head over and over again. And
Yeah.
it's so dumb. It's so dishonest,
Yeah.
which is funny because, like we already said earlier, the gun owner demographics are changing. So a white redneck is not, and I say that with love. Okay, I lived in Alabama. All right, so
Right.
I'm not bagging on rednecks. Love you guys, but what I'm saying here is they portray it as like a racial thing, and gun ownership is not. The Second Amendment is not a racial thing. It
Right.
should not be a racial thing, and it shouldn't be a right or left thing, like we said earlier too. It's just, but they try to stratify it and do that because that way they can just have their little easy culture war narrative and just boom, packaged, done.
No, you're unfortunately correct, and I hate that we can't give the same level of ire and what's the word? Just focus and let's the do some things. I wish the do some things from your book would say, hey, let's do something about in this case, and I don't want to speculate or pontificate, but it's been reported. Oh, we believe it's a domestic violence thing. Then why aren't we talking about that? Like, like
Yeah.
let's get into that. Domestic violence is a real problem in America. Like it's not in the worldwide. I assume just because you put men and women in a room together for years, and someone's going to be upset eventually. That said, the solution is never violence, and if you do struggle with that, seek help. There's plenty of resources out there, and don't take it out on the people that you're supposed to love. That said, kind of moving forward in the conversation, I'm just frustrated because, as you even mentioned this in the book, like if it's if the person is Asian, if the person is black, if the person is anything other than white, and I'm not here white knighting for white dudes because they can stick up for themselves, but the reality is let's be clear, just because several instances has been the majority of Americans are white, and if we have a certain population that is white and a certain population that owns AR-15s, it's one of the most common rifles. Wouldn't a strong amount of emotional crimes or crimes that seem to be crying for mental health, and I don't want to blame mental health on some of these issues. I think some of these issues are just issues of evil in one's heart. Um, you can agree or disagree. That said, I think that we should move beyond the, oh, look at these angry white men, must be a conservative guy. Well, one of the last mass casualty events was from a person who is Hispanic and seemingly a part of the LGBTQIA plus and
Yep.
otherwise community. No disrespect there. I
It's
just, yeah,
no, it's because honestly, evil people can spring from any group. No
yes,
one group has cornered the market on bad. Everybody can produce a crazy guy or an evil person. I mean, that's just how it is. It's so sad too because it honestly does a disservice to the whole thing and the way they play this game. And I try to put some ideas in the book of like what are the proactive things we can do to stop these guys, because afterwards we can look at who they were and what their manifesto was and what they were trying to accomplish, but in that moment that's all irrelevant. All that matters is you want to survive, and the best way to survive is to stop that guy. What stops these killers is a violent response every time. That's what stops killers, violent response. And that violent response can either be quick by somebody who's there, or it can be slow by waiting for the cops to come. And if you have somebody who's there, they're going to have less time to kill people. They're going to have less time to work. And if you have to wait 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes for the cops to come, they're going to kill more people. And so, honestly, the best single defense against that kind of terrible, rare, but terrible event is an armed populace. And it's just regular people can still carry firearms. I mean, so like this event happened in Los Angeles. It is so hard to get a concealed weapons permit in Los Angeles. It's one of the worst places in the country. They do have concealed weapons permits, but you have to be politically connected. You have to have a lot of money, and they're not just giving it to regular dudes on the street. They're not giving it to me and you. They're giving it to tech CEOs. They're giving it to basketball players. They're giving it to bodyguards of movie stars. That's who's going to get it in LA. And then you look at California; they have an assault weapons ban. They have the strictest gun control laws in America. They have every stupid law that I go through in the do somethings like do this, do that, do this. California does it all. California bans every type of gun you could think of. They ban most handguns. They banned most rifles. They have all these weird features they're required to have, and it doesn't make any sense. And they have a waiting period. None. And so we have this horrible thing happen. What's the first thing that all the politicians say? We need more of that. You mean all the stuff that already failed? You're not willing to try to let people defend themselves. You just want to do more of the same stuff that failed. You want to force what California has done to its people onto the rest of us. And it's completely backwards. And we got all these examples. I go through dozens and dozens of examples in the books, and I provide sites to places where you can find hundreds and hundreds of examples of armed citizens defending themselves. And like one of the things is that they always say is a good guy with a gun is a myth.
right,
It's not, and I provide so many examples where it's not. And we provide stats where if you have an armed person there, less people die. If you have an unarmed group, more people die. Period.
yeah. It's really interesting, and there's a few more questions that I'm dying to ask you. Not dying literally, but I really want to ask you. But the reality is, I personally, at some point, believed some of these myths. Like I haven't been in the gun space my whole life. This is not necessarily relatively new, but as I became an adult, I became more active in the Second Amendment sphere as in exercising my rights and engaging in the space in this way anyways. That said, I have heard, even in recent years, oh, a good guy with a gun is not really a thing. And you hear Bill Maher going on about it and different people, and you're like, oh, wow, Bill's kind of educated and Bill's kind of coming around on some of the stuff. And he says it so convincingly. Like, he says it in such a way where it's like, hey, like, buddy, like, and I'm doing my best Bill Maher impression. Like, you don't need a gun. What do you need that for? And good guy with a gun, you're more likely to get killed. And there have been plenty of late night comedy hosts who have gone through, and I can't remember the exact one, but there was one of those late night shows where the guy gets a gun, goes to the shooting range and does this and that, and it's like, whoa, this is crazy. And it's just, I respect this book and I appreciate the insights that it brings, because I've heard all the same things. And at some point, some of them I believed. And not because they're true, but because they said it in a convincing way. And
Yeah.
I guess I was a little gullible. Who
Well,
knows?
no, don't feel bad. You don't know what you don't know, and we've all been there. And to be fair, they have a compelling emotional argument. They always go for the emotion, it's that low hanging fruit, and it doesn't matter if their ideas don't hold up to logical scrutiny. It doesn't even matter if their ideas are backwards and make the problem worse. They just give them to you in such this like holier than thou, self righteous. Think of the children. Won't someone think of the children? And yeah, even though like what they're going to do is going to make the children in more danger and they're going to cause
Right,
more bad stuff to happen, they don't care. And
right.
so a lot of people get suckered. A lot of people get suckered by this.
I'm curious to hear how many people have heard this saying in their life, at least gun owners rather. Um, how many children have to die before you give up your Second Amendment or give up your guns or whatever the end result is that people want? And some people will joke and say something kind of dark, but the reality is that as much as I hate any time a child dies of anything, whether it be an illness or violence against them or their own parents, or whatever violence a child can receive from the world. I hate that. It doesn't mean that my children should be defenseless from the outside world coming in, because people will kick in your door in an instant. They'll kick it
Yep.
in and do whatever they want because they have evil in their heart and the ability to execute on that.
Yeah. They're
So
going
no,
for
I'm gonna keep my
emotional
guns.
manipulation.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, you're spot on, man. It's like honestly, it's like even if we lived in some magic fairy tale world where you could make all the guns go away, evil people are still going to be here. And if
yeah,
every law-abiding citizen in America gave up their guns tomorrow, the bad guys would still do bad stuff. They would drive their car through a parade. They would go to Home Depot and make a bomb. I mean, they've made bombs out of pressure cookers. More people are killed with fists and feet and screwdrivers and baseball bats and rocks than what the left calls assault rifles. And so it doesn't matter. Evil people are going to be evil. And in the meantime, the only thing that we have that evens out the playing field between regular people and violent criminals is guns. Guns are our best tool. Um, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm a big fan of unarmed self defense. I'm a big fan of
yeah.
pepper spray. Even I mean, those are all tools in the toolbox. But man, I tell you, there's nothing else can do what a firearm can do. And so, I mean, I'm a big guy. I'm a big. I've got daughters. I've got family members, and I always see this one where you get some tough guy on Twitter. It's like, oh, you just need a gun because you're compensating. Yeah, yeah, I'm too old to like fist fight six dudes. I'm gonna die. I mean,
Right.
and then, but what about I mean, the whole company? What about my mom? I mean,
Yeah.
does my mom have to fight barehanded against a dude who's twice her size? You know, should my daughter have to do that? And so when you get those people doing that, it's just the gun is just a tool.
Right.
It's self defense is the right. The gun is just the tool.
Yeah, and it's really interesting to hear people cite other countries, and I don't want to spend too much more time on this topic specifically, but citing other countries. And a recent conversation I had, and that one will probably come out a little later. We talk about Japan and how they don't really have gun violence, but The reality is their society is incredibly different, and there is still violence. There are still, all the typical violence against women and people who are not as physically capable. It can happen. Knife violence is still a thing. Like, don't think that just because all the animes look cool and it's a beautiful city and people are eating all sorts of interesting octopus and squid and stuff that people aren't still gonna take you back and hurt you. Like, someone's still gonna hurt you, and wouldn't you rather they had a tool to defend themselves? Anything, but ultimately, a firearm is the most effective tool to stop a deadly threat, also and including a tyrannical government. But no one wants to talk about that.
Yeah,
But
I do. I,
yes, yes, you do.
yeah, I went there.
Yes, you did. But we'll circle back to the tyrannical government. But I do want to talk about a hot button issue: arming teachers.
Oh yeah.
I've recently had a conversation with Phil Smith. He's the president of the National African American Gun Association, and he went on for a little bit talking about how we need to arm churches, we need to arm schools, teachers, etc. And I had a few people in the comment section being like, "Hey, I'm with everything that he's saying, but I don't think teachers should be armed." And I almost feel like they misunderstand the statement,
Yeah.
where it's like, we want to force these teachers. We're gonna strap them up. Like, here's your duty weapon. Here's your Glock, and go out there and save those kids, buddy. It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa,
Yeah.
whoa. Where? If a teacher doesn't want to be armed, they're not going to be armed. Like, you can't force anyone to pick up a
No.
gun.
That's the
Talk about
first
this.
thing yeah. And this one I have a lot of experience on. Because I used to teach teachers concealed carry classes for free. Because my state actually allows for armed teachers in school, and it's basically how it is if you have a concealed weapons permit and you would like to carry your gun to work, you carry your gun to work. That's all it is. I always got to specify. Very first thing is it's voluntary. It's 100% voluntary. It's not mandatory. No one would ever want to arm all teachers. It goes back to what I was saying earlier. It's not for everybody. I mean, psychologically, emotionally, it's not for everybody. But here's the thing: I guarantee in every single school in America, there's at least one or two or three people who are capable and intelligent, and they've got training and they've got a background in this stuff. Let that guy be armed. Let that woman be armed. Um, an example I like to use is back when I was teaching teachers. I had a principal and a couple of his teachers and a janitor bus driver came to my class, and they had an event that a student had gotten real violent, had been armed, and the teachers dealt with it, and the school resource officer, the cop, was not there. So the teachers, the unarmed teachers, had to deal with the situation. It worked out, but it scared the heck out of them. And so this principal at that point said, "Look, it's legal for us to have concealed carry in schools here. I don't want to be unprepared and have kids get hurt because I wasn't protecting them." So he went out and he got a couple other teachers that he knew and trusted as being people that were squared away, and they came and took my class. And in fact, the janitor was a recently returned. He was a young guy. He was a recently returned Iraq War vet. I mean, so this guy had combat experience. This guy had extensive training provided by the government. Um, why wouldn't I want this guy armed in my kid's school in case something horrible happens? And one of the things I got to specify is, like, in Utah, they're not cops. They're not searching lockers. They're not, doing anything. They're not arresting people. No, you don't even know they're armed. They have a gun. It's under their clothing. No one ever sees it. The only time the gun ever comes out is if it's a life or death situation. Um, and we see people all the time. They'll get all hysterical about this. And they'll be like, "Oh, if you have guns in school, then it's going to be like murder and chaos, and teachers are going to be shooting students if they get lippy, and they're going to be shooting people over parking lot spaces." And it doesn't happen.
Yeah,
We've
no,
had it for over a decade.
that's actually been a big concern with a certain a section of my audience who they're very aware and conscious of some of the issues between, more specifically, black students living in a world that doesn't quite understand them because they're from different environments or whatever the reason is. Um, and the question has always been like, hey, we see this situation where this one teacher literally locked a kid out in the cold for several hours. Now, well, what if you gave that teacher a gun? Would that student be dead? Or all it takes is one. This is one of the more valid arguments that I heard, which maybe you can debunk if you want to, which is all it takes is one teacher to mess around and kill a kid or even injure a kid, and it will shut the whole thing down. Now, to this
Yeah.
point, in Texas, we also have what's called the Guardian program. I think you mentioned it loosely in the book, where if basically the school district says go for it, teachers can either generally they can be armed, sometimes through a program or however it's done. And there's teachers literally in my area. I think they're more private school teachers who can go through PPO programs and become armed. And people like that PPO being like level 4 security, personal protection officer, which kind of gives them some additional education and some additional training, which is I think important. But I know you personally have said like, hey, some of the barriers, like forcing them to get anything more than a license to carry, you think maybe kind of silly. But before we address that, could you address the thought of some of the racial tension between teachers and
Yeah.
or uh, one teacher messes up and it's over for everybody?
Yeah, because you're going to have bad actors. You're going to have some people that are just flawed people who are just bad people in any field of endeavor. It's kind of like cops. You can have 100 cops who are great and don't do anything wrong, and then you have one guy who is a scumbag and causes all sorts of troubles. Teachers, yeah, it's the same thing. You're going to have teachers who are just jerks or just dirtbags, and we see it all the time. It doesn't even involve guns, but there'll be like horrible things. You have teachers who will take advantage of kids, in ways I don't want to. This we're talking guns. I don't want to get into this other stuff, but there are going to be bad actors. But you got to weigh basically the cost, the pros and the cons. And if you have somebody who's truly violent and dangerous, and whether it's a racial tension thing or it's a class thing or the guy is just a psycho, you could have abusive and dangerous teachers. And honestly, there's nothing stopping that guy from being armed anyway. Like if he is truly like breaking the law and he's a bad dude, it doesn't matter. Bad dude's going to have a gun, because he doesn't care.
Yeah,
So honestly, to me, that's one where you got to weigh the costs. It's like yeah, cops suck, or one cop sucks, 100 cops are good, but that one cop causes all this trouble. Do I want to remove the other 100 cops, off the street? Because then what's that do? And so to me, the
right.
teacher thing is if you have a teacher who is armed and abuses that at all, fire them. They shouldn't be a teacher to begin with. They need to be out of there. I think the main thing you need to do as far as concealed carry in schools is just amend your employment agreement to say if you ever produce this gun for any situation that's not life or death, legal use of force, you're gone forever. You're fired for eternity. Get out. Pack your crap. Doors that way. Um, because honestly, this is it's a cost benefit analysis. So we're truly worried about protecting these kids. We're truly worried about protecting these places that are defenseless, hunting preserves the innocent. Then you got to put something there to protect them.
Yeah,
And if you're not willing to put something there to protect them, then we're just paying lip service to this whole thing, and we're sticking a. And then they come along and they want to do gun control afterwards, like sticking a band-aid on a sucking chest wound.
yeah,
You got to stop it from occurring. So yeah, I mean that is a valid point. There are power tripping teachers. I had a terrible school experience. I grew up in uh, California public schools, junior gladiator academy for gifted drive-by shooters. Okay,
woo,
I mean my school sucked,
yeah.
and yeah, Merced, go Merced Bears.
Go
But
Merced, woo.
yeah, and so it's changed a lot, but my thing is, yeah, you're going to have bad apples in any endeavor, but you got to, if it's worth it to defend the kids from the worst possible thing that can happen, then it's worth it.
Yeah,
You know, that's to me, but I think that's a valid concern. But if you look at people who conceal weapon permit carriers are actually the single most law abiding demographic there is in America. We beat pretty much everything else. And it's interesting because that's permit holders so it's not religious, it's not racial, it's not sociological, there's not a income difference. It's the people who have chosen to take this extra step to defend themselves, that gun, that people with the gun culture. It's very rare that any concealed weapons permits get. I mean, they do. They get revoked for criminal stuff, but it's rare. And it's almost never that they use their gun to do something bad. It's more like tax evasion or
Yeah,
something stupid.
something white collar and dumb. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
they got caught doing something stupid.
yeah, yeah, which is unfortunate. But I think you've said some really interesting points, and I can appreciate um, the individual who has the motivation to say like, hey, I want to do this the right way. I've met many people who are perfectly capable of going and buying a gun. This is Texas right now. We have constitutional carry, thank goodness, because it wasn't like that when I first moved here.
That's awesome.
And the interesting thing is, I know a lot of people who are perfectly able to go pass a background check, have a firearm, go train, but they're like, I want to do it the right way. I want to get my license to carry. I'm like, okay, cool, that's fine too. I mean, I'd get the gun, just make sure you have it, and but you can get your license to carry. That's awesome. Go ahead and do you, fam. But the thought that like, hey, these people they're submitting themselves for background checks in Texas, you got to be fingerprinted, which is an additional step. Like, what person who is intent on doing criminal acts is saying, "Oh, let me go get fingerprinted, make it easier to get caught"? That's generally not the case.
Yeah,
Like, if you're going to do something illegal or violent, you're going to do it anyways. And I'm not saying, like you said, that there aren't going to be some teachers or individuals who would go too far with their evil, but those people are going to commit evil anyways. Like,
yeah,
this isn't really going to make that much of a difference. Hopefully not. I think the evidence will show as more time goes on, and I'm hoping and praying that it does not show itself in an ugly way. I really don't want to see that, especially because this is for the kids. It's for
yeah.
the kids.
And like I said, we're Utah. It makes for a good experiment. People always like to talk about follow the science. Okay, so we got
Right.
we got a perfectly good experiment here that we've been doing for almost 20 years, and it's not been the nightmare that they said it was going to be. And we have had incidences that armed teachers have stopped. We had an attempted kidnapping I wrote about in the book,
You did.
where somebody tried to kidnap a kid from school, and an armed teacher stopped him. So we've actually had incidences that show that honestly it's a net positive. And so, yeah, I'm a big advocate for allowing guns in school.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's the more the more that the government makes some places gun free and other places okay, the more problems it's going to cause, and the more people aren't going to carry anywhere because they don't want to get in trouble with the law. But think about it, who doesn't want to get in trouble with the law? Law-abiding people.
Right.
If you're a crook, you don't care. I mean, who cares?
It's interesting, and I'm going to touch on this point. Then we're going to move on to another major question that I had, which is in Texas specifically, uh, you can't carry in most like hospital type buildings. Which,
Mm-hmm.
if your gym is connected to a hospital, you can't have a gun in your gym. Which I'm not saying that all people work out with guns. Most of them don't, but I would like to be able to have it with me just in case.
Yeah,
Weird stuff happens everywhere. You know, I mean, like you said, evil travels, and I meant to bring that
yeah.
up, and I kind of wonder what you mean by that. I mean, I have my interpretation, but what did you mean by evil travels in your book?
Well, because I always see these people, and it's such a naive, weird way of looking at life. They're like, I don't need a gun because I don't go any place where bad stuff happens. And I'm like, what an incredibly naive way to live. I mean, evil moves around, evil delivers, and also people get like very weird because they're like, well, you don't need a gun, just don't go anywhere bad. Well, that's nice for you to say if you live in some place that's really safe, but what about the people who don't? What about the people who live in the place that's bad? Why should they be disarmed just because you are uncomfortable? I mean, it's funny because like the most high violent crime rate places in America are the places most likely to have extreme restrictions where people aren't allowed to have guns in public. And it's so weird and backwards to me that people would have this idea that, oh, I live someplace safe. Or I also see the one too where people who have a gun and they're like, well, I'm not going to carry it unless I'm going to go someplace dangerous. Well, what are you doing that for? You don't know when a place is going to be dangerous. And if you look at a lot of these events that have happened, it's sudden. There's not rhyme or reason to it. It's just a sudden event. And when a sudden event happens, you either have the tools with you that will enable you to do something, or you don't. And if you don't have the tools that you can fight back with, then your options are run, hide, or pray. So yeah, evil, like I said, evil travels around, evil delivers, evil don't care, and it looks for targets of opportunity. And so I don't know. Some people get really self-righteous about this stuff, but honestly, we're all vulnerable. We're all human. Um, we're all imminently mortal, and so people just need to like realize that life is dangerous, and there's bad people out there who will do bad things, and just you got to prepare for that, and you got to deal with it.
You're absolutely correct. Evil delivers, which is we got to slap that on the t-shirt if you haven't already. If you don't, I will. So you got to go ahead and take care of that.
Go for it, man.
Appreciate
I
that.
don't know. I don't remember where I got that from, so I don't own it.
Hey man, I mean, like, hey, to me, I picture like a pizza, like a pizza card, but instead of it saying like Pizza Hut or something, it's like evil. It's like, hey, honey, did you order evil? No. Oh,
Oh,
well, they're here,
yep, they're
knocking
here.
on your door. You know, what's that? What's that? The old hide your kids, hide your wives. They're climbing in your
Yeah.
window,
Yeah.
snatching.
Oh, I love that guy.
Yeah, snatching your people up, hide your kids, hide your wives. Um, Moving to, I guess, a point of contention. I think I understand what you mean by it, and this has been kind of a point that a lot of gun guys have said, or a lot of Second Amendment advocates per se, which is the media. They want more bodies. They're not happy if not, only a small amount of people got killed. You mentioned it in the book, fantastic book, in defense of the Second Amendment. Um, but you basically implied several times that, hey, the media, they're disappointed if not enough people get killed. Do you really believe that, or do you feel like there's like even a slight amount of hyperbole in that sentence, or do you
No,
generally
I,
believe that,
I
hey, they want it
I
more?
genuinely believe that. I
Yeah.
really do. I think these that we're dealing with. When we're talking about the media, I think we're talking about a group that is so insular and so full of themselves and what they believe that they see tragic things in the news every day, right? That's just, I mean, their job is to report this stuff. And I think a lot of them, and I'm not saying all reporters. There's a lot of decent. I've met a lot of reporters that are actually decent human beings, and I've met others that are honestly the worst people I've ever known, and most profoundly disingenuous and dishonest, pathological liars, narcissistic, manipulative people I've ever had the displeasure of dealing with. And so what we have is, if there's an event, you can almost see them being gleeful about it. Yeah, they'll put on their fake tears, and they'll get all solemn, and they're actors, they'll act for the camera. But you'll see them be disappointed. Like we talked about some of these other shootings where the identity of the shooter turned out to not be the kind of person they could capitalize on. They're disappointed, and it drops off the news. When it's something that it's like a horrible thing and it's something they can make political hay out of, they're downright gleeful. You can see it. I mean, they're. I've been watching this for 30 years, and they're enthusiastic because I think part of them. I mean, yeah, some of them are just nihilistic jerks, but others, they are kind of like do-gooders, and they think they know what's best, and so if they can lie, cheat, and steal and manipulate to make the world a better place, which in their eyes is disarming all of us, then they're going to do it. And so there'll be cases where a mass casualty event will happen, and they'll be just like, oh boy, this is so exciting. We're gonna like, and this just shows how guns are bad and shows how Americans are bad and how you need to be controlled. And then something will come out that changes the narrative, and it's just like, oh no, yeah, well, oh well, we're wrong. And yeah, so no, I have nothing but disdain and loathing for people like that. And so I don't just imply that they're vultures. I mean, I flat out say it. They're vultures. They want carnage, and they reward it. But, like we said earlier, they flat out reward the killer. They give the killer exactly what they want, and the killer will say, "Hey, I want to be famous." They'll make the killer famous, and they even provide lessons for the killers. like they'll be disappointed. Like say they want to ban AR-15s because that's a real common gun. That's the one they're all hung up on. When I was younger, it was AK-47s or Uzis, right? They just whatever was popular at the time, they're going to want to ban it. And if the killer, they'll be like, oh, he probably used an AR-15. They're so deadly. Get him off the street. And then it'll come out and it's like, oh, he used a pump shotgun, or he used something else. He used a pistol, and then the news will be disappointed. They'll be, oh well, just think how much more worse this would have been if there had been an AR-15. And then the next killer is like, oh, okay, I'm going to make a note of that. I mean, clearly this is what I need if I want to get maximum media coverage. So yeah, I don't just imply it. I'll flat out say it. Yeah, they're awful.
Yeah, no, with all that said, it makes perfect sense why you feel so strongly and why you didn't necessarily mince words when addressing the vultures per se. Um, I do think that the old saying "if it bleeds, it leads" applies heavily to
Yeah.
this thing, and it's horrifying because it's like, man, I really hate the idea that what America loves to hear about. And when we say loves, we can become engrossed by the train wreck of violence in America uh, is enhanced more specifically by the reporting of it. Like, 'cause we have a choice. We can say like, hey, listen, I know this is good for ratings. People see it and they'll get emotionally excited or horrified, and you'll have Granny sitting by the TV, kind of sipping her tea, shaking, just not quite
Yep.
sure what to do. We got to do something. And now we're watching more commercials. Now the more commercials means more income. The ratings are going up. We're superstars. We're getting Emmys. But I think the soul of America and the children within it are more valuable than an Emmy and some dollar bills, in my opinion.
I think you're right.
Yeah. That said, we're going to go to a quick break and then we're going to finish out on some of these questions that I have for you. And if you have tuned in this far, thank you so much for being a part of the conversation. I hope that you'll drop some questions down below. But before you do, consider this. Consider joining us on Patreon because that is the best way to support the show. You and your monthly gifts and donations slash contributions, they go towards this kind of building out the studio, making sure we can do more in-person things, and of course having awesome guests like Larry on the show, um, promoting his book and just having the real conversations that we want to have. That said, please join us there, and even if you can't, join me on Instagram at armed_atlas because we're having cool conversations over there, and of course costly_conversations_pod for the podcast clips. Those will be all over there. So check us out over there. Thank you so much. And back to the show. Larry, thank you so much for being here and talking about your book, The Amazing. If you haven't picked it up, guys, In Defense of the Second Amendment, where can people find it, first of all?
It's available everywhere books are sold. So yeah, Barnes and Noble, Amazon, independent bookstores. Actually, some gun stores are carrying it,
Nice.
um, which is pretty fun. Also, if you listen to audiobooks, it's available on audio, and you can get it on like Audible.com or it's from Blackstone. So anywhere audiobooks are sold too.
Excellent. I love audiobooks. Like, this is actually one of the first physical books that I'm reading in a minute. And I'm like, hey, you know what? Readers are leaders are readers. So I'm going to read. So that
Yeah.
said, it's freaking awesome. And I hope that people, however you listen, will support the book and support the work because more conversations like this need to happen. And they won't happen if people don't support the work. That said, it's my understanding that many people are supporting it, so people should continue to jump on and support this thing. So
Yeah, it's actually on the pre-orders. It's done extremely well. It's shaping up to be really huge. I'm very excited because this is the first nonfiction thing I've ever written. I've written a ton of novels, so I'm used to that. I've been through that a lot, but so this is my first rodeo with nonfiction, and like it's so far really exciting, and I'm really excited that people are looking forward to it, and I hope you guys like it, and I hope it moves the needle. That's my fervent hope is that it actually helps the debate.
I think it will, and I think really one of the important things is that people actually get their hands on it, take a look through it, and then give it to that aunt or uncle who is like, "What you need guns for? Oh, are you a police officer? Because he saw me posing with a gun or whatever, being a little gun bunny." But it's like, no, 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 no. Like, I don't have to be in military or law enforcement to express my Second Amendment rights, to defend my family with a firearm, to train and to be learn how to be extremely effective. And we'll leave it at that. We don't have to be some sort of special operator in order to be effective. So that's something that I hope people will do is get the book, give it away. What is the best way to buy the book? Like, what is there a method of purchasing the book that really is more effective when it comes to, I guess, bringing in revenue so that this is more effective for you and the publisher?
Um,
Is there a way?
Honestly, I always tell people just whatever makes you comfortable because it all comes back to us and it all helps. And
Yeah.
honestly, my thing is just whatever makes you happy. So if it's
Okay.
audio, if it's physical, if it's ebook, to me, I'm just happy to get it out there, and I'm sure the publisher is too. So it's like honestly, whatever you guys enjoy. So support your local booksellers.
Okay, so I mean that's the big one. Support the local bookstores if you guys can find it there, or hop into a gun shop and support those guys. I think that's a big deal. I've heard in the past that audio book sales don't necessarily help the authors as much. I mean that might be a myth or some sort of wise tale, but
Well, getting away from gun stuff, but like I know a lot about publishing. What it is the bestseller lists are calculated off of physical book sales primarily, and most of that's going to be on your release week because it's
okay.
about velocity of sales. So honestly, if you want to make a statement, buy it the release week. But honestly, I'm already a New York Times bestseller. I'm not going to make the list again. They don't like me. They know who I am now.
Ah,
So
they say, "Oh, he's a
uh,
gun nut. Oh, we don't like that
yeah,
Larry guy. Oh, wait, Larry?
yeah.
No, he can't make the list."
Well, it's actually funny. So a bunch of my novels made the New York Times bestseller list until they knew who I was, and then I've never made it since, even though my sales have gone up. They're very
Interesting.
biased, and that's okay. I mean, it is what it is.
The
But
clicks.
we we've already sold enough off pre-orders to make the New York Times bestseller list, but I don't think we're going to just because they have my name on like a post-it on the wall. Screw this guy.
Larry done piss somebody off. Sorry, Larry. That said, I'm thankful that people are supporting the book, and I'm hopeful that a few people in this audience will go and support. Not because we just want to sell stuff, but because this kind of book, this is important to push the needle forward, as you said, to enhance the conversation so that people are maybe a little bit more equipped. Because after being battered online all day, I think it's helpful to have something that, because I've been called like a child killer before, or I have the blood of kids on my hands. Like, what are you talking about? I have two small children. I love kids. I don't like the attitudes, but I love kids in general. That said, this kind of book is kind of like a refresher course. I'm like, okay, I've been hearing like horrible things all day. There's a lot of truth in here. I would say all of it is based in truth, and I think it's refreshing. So thank you for going out of your way, doing the book, kind of taking a chance. I know it's not necessarily in your wheelhouse. There might have been some apprehension. I don't know what your process was like, but did you have apprehension when jumping in?
Oh man, I've done this so many times that yeah, it doesn't matter how many times you've written a book. Every time a book comes out, you're nervous. It's just so it's funny because like I said on Facebook the other day in front of my fans, I was like, "Wow, the book is doing really good on pre-orders. I'm very excited." And somebody goes, "Was there any doubt? Was there ever any doubt?" And I go, "Always."
Yeah. It's interesting from that parasocial relationship of a fan to, say, your favorite author or content creator, whatever one might call themselves, is you oftentimes as a fan believe in the person you support way more than they even do. Even though on their best day
Yeah,
they might gas themselves and be like, all right, I can do this. I'm a New York Times bestseller. I can go write a book. I love guns. Um, And I suppose we already talked about why you more particularly feel qualified to write the book, being that you've been in this space for a long time, you understand many things about quote unquote gun culture. I call it the gun community. You call it gun culture. I'm not sure if there's a real difference in those two things. I think it's just tomatoes, tomatoes. But
Yeah, pretty much. It's a bunch of people, and honestly, it's a very wide bunch united by one thing, and
yeah,
that's believing in the Second Amendment. It honestly, I know people who like guns who are all over the board on every other politic, and that's why I tried real hard in the book too not to hit any other politics. I tried to keep it to guns because that's what we're talking about today. And so if I disagree with you on 100 other subjects, that's fine. But if we're on the same side on the Second Amendment, then we're on the same side on the Second Amendment, and let's take a stand together on that.
yeah. So I do want to ask because I know we're kind of coming to the end of our time, and I want to be respectful of that. But I do have like one or two more questions, so I'm going to try to fire those in there and see if we can't finish out strong. In regards to, uh, there is some brovet dude bros who have said in the past, like, hey, we need some gun control. That's probably the way we're going to save America. We need some. We need to, or 19-year-olds really don't need rifles. Like, I've served in the military. I know best, yada, yada. And unfortunately, as much as I love the troops, sometimes the chatter isn't helpful, guys. Like, kind of cut it out, like ixnay on the talking, because
Yeah,
the position and the authority that I serve the nation gives is tremendous. So if you come out and say like, hey, kids don't need guns, like people listen to that. That said,
yeah.
how do you personally feel about people like lowering the age of handgun recipients to under 21? Because right now it's set to 21. Some people want to boost it up. Some people want to do different things. Some people want to increase the age for rifles. How do you personally feel about that? Can you share?
My personal thing on that is that I think if we should pick one age for adulthood and stick with it. And I think honestly that if you're an 18-year-old, I moved out when I was 16. I moved out really early. I was out on my own as a teenager. That's just how I grew up. Um, my kids, I have three adult kids now. I have some that are not adults yet, but honestly, when they're 18 years old, they moved out. They're living on their own. They've got their own place. They're going to college. They have jobs. Why shouldn't they be able to defend themselves? Why should they be denied the rights that the rest of us enjoy? Why should we make 18-year-olds second class citizens? And I think it's really interesting that the same people who want to change the age of gun ownership to 21 are the same people who want to change the voting age to 16. You know,
You
it's
got them there.
hypocritical.
Yeah, you've got them there. And I personally, I've mulled about it in my head. I try to consider myself a two-way absolutist, but there are times where I'm like, hey, you know what? If you guys are so strongly against young people, because there is some science to suggest that people's brains aren't fully developed, even though we give them cars that are tons and there's no restrictions other than maybe like CDLs and different classes of licenses to drive like semis. But you can get a kid, load them up in a Tahoe, fully loaded with a bunch of bricks, and let them drive around, and no one cares. Uh, that said,
That's way more
but
dangerous.
right, it seems like that would be more dangerous in general. But I was like, okay, well, if you're gonna raise the age to 21, raise everything to 21. Like, don't force a kid to go into the military. Like, change the draft age. Don't even let them join at 18, because you guys are taking advantage, right? Because these kids' brains aren't developed, and you're gonna go let them lose their life on a battlefield somewhere for some old white guy in DC. Like, come on, like, yeah,
Yeah.
you know
I mean,
that's
it's
that's the
pick one.
compromise. Pick one.
Pick one and just stick to it.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're mature enough to do one thing, I mean, you're either an adult or you're not, and they keep changing stuff, and like it's even some stuff is not even 21 anymore. It's like you can't rent a car until you're
What is it, 26 or
24, I
something?
think.
Is it 24?
26.
Okay. Yeah.
I just want. Here's the kicker. When I was 24, I was married, had a kid. You know,
Yeah.
I mean,
Like I was in college. I got married about 20. Did I get married at 23? Yeah, I think I did get married. I can't remember. Anyways,
Yeah, I
so
mean,
it's
what the
crazy.
heck?
Like we are really kind of taking these things. It's like, wait, I met my wife by the time I was 18, going on 19, and if we had gotten married then, I would be restricted on the types of arms that I could use if we were going out on a date. I'd have to literally bring a rifle with me if I want to use a firearm to defend myself from whoever. Um,
Yeah.
that said, I do want to hit on one last kind of more serious question right before I ask you about the NFA, and then we'll call it a day. Is there any time when gun laws are actually helpful, like in your opinion? I know some people are like, "Oh, gun laws are infringements on my rights," and I think they're mostly right. But are there times where you feel like, okay, this gun law that we currently have is fine. Like we'll let it exist. We're not gonna lose our mind because it exists.
That's actually interesting because, and being dead honest here, and I'm not just saying this because I love the Second Amendment, but no, I don't think there is. And when I go through the book, I go through a lot of the existing ones. I go through all the proposals. I go through other countries, and I honestly and truly believe that no, it's not. The only thing I would say, as far as uh, honestly, like we have convicted felons, and we've let people out of prison, and we don't let them own guns anymore. But you know what? If it's a non-violent felony and the guy never hurt anybody, he went to prison for unpaid parking tickets. I don't know, whatever, embezzlement or something when or he had drugs. He got caught with drugs when he was 18 years old and got sent to prison, and now he's 50. He's a grandpa. He's got a business. He's paying his taxes. He owns a house, but the guy had a drug charge when he was 18 years old, and he doesn't have a Second Amendment rights. He's a second class citizen forever. Um, so no, I've never come across a gun law that I think actually does anything. I go into a book on background checks, and a lot of people are okay with background checks, but I go into that, and they're worse than useless. I mean, they're completely useless. They don't do anything, like literally, because the government doesn't even prosecute anybody when they try to break this law. But we all have to obey it. So no, I've never found one that, as far as I know, that's worth a damn.
Yeah, well, I'm actually curious about. Oh, I hope people will read the section on background checks because the reality is a lot of gun owners use like no, there's background checks as kind of like the like leave us alone piece for
Yeah.
when people who are extremely anti-gun are like, hey, it's easier or girls' clothes are more regulated than uh, guns in America. I'm like, what? Okay, calm down, Susan. Like, what are you talking about? But like, people say stupid stuff, like idiotic stuff like that, and I'm like, I don't understand. But then we say like, well,
Yeah.
there are background checks. Like, you can't just walk into a gun store, pick one off the shelf, and walk out. I mean, even though with in some countries you can walk into a store like a gun shop and pick up a suppressor and walk right out, and it's like no big deal. And the counter argument to that is guns are so heavily regulated there that the accessories are like whatever. Like if you want that, you've already gone through tons of loopholes, and if you shouldn't have it, then you're probably a bad guy or something. Who knows? But
Yeah, they're so insanely restricted anyway.
yeah, which speaking of suppressors, right before we go, the NFA. I was listening to a podcast that Matt Gaetz was doing, and he was like, "Yeah, I want to present a bill that would basically defund the ATF." Which I'm like, "A Republican wants to defund the police? What?
I'm in.
Okay, I mean it's the ATF, so I'm
I'm
like,
100% in on that one.
yeah." But I was in this conversation slash debate recently talking about like, okay, well, uh, should we need to basically abolish the ATF? And I was like, I think I think it's more effective to remove the NFA or some of these gun restrictions first because the ATF is completely toothless if they have no laws to enforce. Even if they want to go around evaluating what laws exist to enforce them how they want to, as they often do. But what I suppose like with the NFA, I know you mentioned wanting to make some changes. What are these
Prefer-
changes that you would like to make?
Preferably abolish it. But in the process of working towards it, because it's just a bad law for people who aren't familiar with it. It's 90 years old. It was created in the gangster days of Al Capone days. It doesn't work. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't. It hasn't kept up on technology. It doesn't keep up on like what is popular. It doesn't keep up on what Americans are actually doing. It's just a old, stupid, archaic law, and it's filled with a bunch of nonsense like regulating short-barreled rifles, regulating short-barreled shotguns. And if you look at that stuff, it's really, really goofy because like the rules don't make any sense. I go through in the book and I break down how the rules work, but if I have a shotgun with an 18-inch barrel, it's not any more dangerous or less dangerous than a shotgun with a 17-inch barrel. I mean, if I made that barrel 1 inch shorter, it's not anything. It doesn't matter, except that's 10 years in prison, mandatory punishment. And it's stupid. And part of the thing was it was like to ban powerful concealable weapons, except we all now carry concealed weapons everywhere, and these are larger than those. And honestly, it depends on what they are because you could have the same caliber even, and one's illegal and bigger. It's bigger and harder to hide, and that's illegal. And I can carry a smaller one in a more powerful cartridge, and that's perfectly legal. So that doesn't make any sense. It also regulates machine guns. That's the law that cut off machine guns in the U.S. And then in 1986 they stopped any new ones. And people don't realize machine guns are legal. We have legal machine guns in America. There's hundreds of thousands of them, and guys like me used to build them, and that's perfectly legal. And we just had to pay extra taxes and do extra paperwork. And so honestly, it doesn't make a lick of difference because criminals, there's far more illegal machine guns in the U.S. than there are legal ones. Because criminals just make whatever they want. I mean, it's really easy. You can 3D print the parts you need to make guns full auto. I mean, they're not complicated. These are not that complicated of machines. And we see crooks all the time. You see videos of criminals showing off their illegal machine guns that they've built. And it's like, hey, look what I've got. This is, and they don't care. They just don't care. And so that's one of those that regular people, our rights are being stymied. Criminals don't care. But honestly, if we were to work on the NFA, the first thing we need to hit is the short-barreled rifles, the short-barreled shotguns, because honestly, that makes no sense. The ATF is currently using that law as a giant club to beat millions of gun owners, because for the last 10 years, we've been buying what's called brace pistols, and it's been perfectly legal. The ATF said they were fine, and regular people were going to just the sporting goods store or whatever and buying these brace pistols. And then this last week, so 2 weeks ago on Friday afternoon, the ATF came out and said that's now a felony. That's super illegal, and we've now got 120 days to register them with the government, destroy them, or give them to the ATF, or they're gonna, or you're a felon, you know. And there's millions of them, millions and millions. I mean, somewhere anywhere. The ATF says 3 million. That's a stupid number. No one believes it. There's individual gun companies that have sold more than 3 million brace pistols, in one individual company. And realistically, we're looking between like 14 and 40 million of these guns in the U.S. And so we're talking tens of millions of American citizens. ATF used the NFA to just say, boom, you're a felon. Comply or go to jail. And that's going on right now. So yeah, the NFA has got to go. It's a train wreck, and it's where the ATF gets most of its power. The Gun Control Act of 1968 is based on the NFA. Recent Supreme Court decisions poke some holes in the NFA, which makes me hopeful that should there be a good, solid challenge against the NFA, like under this brace ruling, we might actually see. Because I know Clarence Thomas and Sam Alito hate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they hate the NFA. So let's bring it. Let's get that to court.
I'm here for it. Fingers crossed. Prayers sent. All the different things, and
Amen.
I'm I'm actually I'm actually kind of excited with this whole race debacle because it's like y'all wouldn't actually be able to criminalize 40 million Americans who some of them I've met who are like, I'm not doing this. And
Yeah.
everybody's adults. They can make their own adult decisions and choose how dangerously they want to live their life. And I'm all for dangerous freedom. So do your thing. That said, I think this is going to literally push some of the Republicans who claim that they are pro-gun to actually make a move or get out of town. Like,
Put
and
up or
I'm
shut up time.
right. And I'm not some partisan guy. Like, if you whoever you want to vote for, do your thing, but understand that if the politician doesn't actually stand for your gun rights, they're not they're not actually for you. Like anyone who this is guy that I'm training under. He's like, I would never train you to do this job unarmed because I don't hate you. I would never send you out unarmed. And unfortunately, there's so many politicians who would rather you be unarmed because it doesn't work for them. That said, for the Republicans who claim that they're pro-gun and for any of the Democrats or independents who claim to support the people, it's time. Make your move. Put up or shut up. And hopefully it gets pushed all the way up to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court can be like, hey, this isn't working. Let's just get rid of it, reevaluate everything, and hopefully it makes more sense for the American public in making sure that we are properly armed and able to fight back against tyranny in all of its forms. Tyranny and
Yep,
evil. It's
absolutely.
out here, and it delivers. So, sir, thank you so much for coming on the show. We're coming to the end of our time, and I know it's about time for you to hop off. Thank you so much for coming on the show. How can people find you?
You can follow me on social media if you're into that kind of thing. I'll warn you, I'm pretty abrasive on social media. I don't have a lot of patience anymore. But I'm on Twitter. I'm Monster Hunter 45 on Twitter. Just Larry Correia on Facebook. My blog is monsterhunternation.com. And yeah, that's yeah, monsterhunternation.com. So that's the best place to get a hold of me.
Okay, monsterhunternation.com, and I'm sure they can find all your links there if they really are excited about your personality and they want to get into the nitty gritty. But of course, they should most certainly grab a copy of the book because the more books like this that are supported, the more people can feel comfortable kind of making more content that is 2A friendly. Like imagine money motivates people and winning fixes everything. So how awesome would it be that if publishers who are maybe on the fence can see them like, oh, Second Amendment book is doing pretty good. Okay, well, I guess we'll greenlight another Jack Carr book, or we'll do different things that are more kind of in this space that is gun friendly. Like I think it could be
Jack,
helpful, and I don't know that
I
to
was
be a
gonna say
fact,
Jack
but
Carr is probably the only other author that gives me a run for my money, and like as far as mainstream fiction authors,
yeah,
probably the only other guy that gives me a run for my money on gun nuttery.
yeah. Well, we appreciate his work, and of course, we enjoyed the show and things like that. But let's go ahead and do a quick sign out. And thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate you coming on and talking about the book.
No, thanks for having me on. I had a great time. That was a good conversation. I appreciate it.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. So that said, for those of you who are still watching or listening, please go ahead, check us out on all the social medias. There's links down below for all this stuff, different people who support us, people that we support. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, armed_atlas is for the pew pew content. And of course, costly_conversations_pod on Instagram for podcast clips. And of course, you can find podcast clips here. This social media stuff is hard, so please share some of the clips out. Help us to break through some of these algorithms because these people are not your friends. They do not care about your guns. They do not care about your freedom. They kind of want to push what they push. So how about you push what you push? That said, thank you so much for watching or listening wherever you are. If you're on the podcast side, subscribe on YouTube and other way around. And keep it costly.